Today, we're going to be talking about, does a land contract need to be recorded? Land contracts can be amazing tools, but many aspects around a land contract are misunderstood. Well, don't fear, because by the end of this video, you'll understand the importance of recording a land contract and how it can protect both the buyer and the seller. Have you ever wondered if a land contract needs to be recorded to make it legally binding? Have you ever had questions about potential risks or benefits of recording a land contract? Well, I'll answer these questions by first explaining what a land contract is. Secondly, I will detail out the main components of a land contract for both the buyer and the seller. And finally, I'll explain where land contracts need to be recorded for the buyer's and seller's safety. If you're ready, let's go. So what is the main difference between a land contract and a traditional purchase and sales agreement? So a land contract is a seller financing agreement with terms that have been negotiated between the buyer and the seller. Because of this, a lot of the provisions within a land contract can really vary based on the situation of both the buyer and the seller. And they aren't subject to any conforming rules or regulations or requirements like a traditional mortgage. In contrast, mortgages are structured in a very detailed way. And traditionally, mortgages come with very predictable interest rates. With land contracts, the seller and buyer can distinguish what that interest rate is at their own discretion. In addition, with traditional land contracts, the seller retains the legal title of the property until the last payment is made and all conditions have been met. This is not the case if it's a wraparound mortgage. With a wraparound mortgage, you have a mortgage that you're paying if you are the seller, right? And if somebody's paying you, you receive their money and you turn around and you pay the mortgage that you owe to the bank. Now, once the final payment has been made, it's the buyer's responsibility of filing the property deed in the new owner's name, obviously with the appropriate government office. So what are the components of a land contract? Looking through the lens of the buyer, and then we'll look through the lens of the seller. For the buyer, it's an amazing tool, and their mindset is going in thinking, I cannot get a traditional mortgage, so something like this is going to allow me to own a piece of property even though I don't have a good credit history, or maybe bad credit, or been through a challenging situation in my past credit life owning a piece of property. Maybe it was a pre-foreclosure or foreclosure. It also might be an option for buyers who do not have enough money saved up for a down payment on a piece of property. So from the seller's side and the seller's mindset, this is why a land contract could be a really good thing. And I will just tell you up front that a land contract is extremely advantageous if you are the seller. And for good reason. It is the seller that's taken a little bit higher risk when it comes to getting somebody into a home and financing a home to an individual who might not otherwise be able to qualify for a mortgage. So the risk is definitely greater for the seller. Now, the seller can charge more because it's not going through the bank, and you can set your own interest rate, so there's opportunity to make more money every single month utilizing a land contract. If the buyer defaults on the property, the seller keeps all of the payments ever made on that property. Because you're not going through a traditional mortgage that typically takes 60 to 90 days to get done, a land contract goes much faster. So it takes less time to finalize and close on a piece of property. Essentially, a land contract really benefits the seller for this reason. They can act as the landlord without any of the landlord responsibilities. Because the seller still maintains the legal rights of the property until the last payment is made, if the buyer defaults on the property, he can evict that person from the property without having to go through the foreclosure process. Because if you are the bank in a traditional scenario where a bank has lent money to a homeowner and the homeowner stops making payment, the bank has to go through an entire foreclosure process, which can be tedious and long and tiresome. However, with a land contract, the seller who is financing that property can evict the buyer anytime they default on the property, and that is usually detailed out inside of a land contract. However, they do not have the landlord responsibilities of paying taxes, insurance, repairs, or maintenance. Because the buyer is the owner of the home, they are responsible for all the things that a typical buyer is responsible for. So now that we understand what land contracts are and the components and seeing it through the seller's and the buyer's eyes, let's now dive into the important question of this video: does it need to be recorded? And the answer to that can get a little bit dicey. So should they be recorded? The simple answer is yes. Land contracts are actually required to be recorded in 13 states, but the enforcement varies by jurisdiction. Some states will actually recommend it, but not require it. I honestly do believe it's a good practice to have land contracts recorded, and that is for the safety of both the buyer and the seller. But here are some key points when it comes to recording land contracts. Recording the land contract at the county recorder's office establishes the buyer's interest in the property, so it protects you as the buyer. And it also proves that the owner or the seller has agreed to sell you that property and obviously turn over that property to you once it's paid in full. So there's an immense protection for you as the buyer. It also establishes the buyer's legal interest in the property, even if something were to happen to the owner. If the contract isn't recorded, third parties may be able to remove the buyer from the title, and the buyer may have to seek relief from the seller. And if you've heard of anything out there right now, if you've ever done a real estate deal in the last little bit, you've seen a lot of times that title companies are sending you stuff that says, listen, we won't call you, we won't ask, we won't give you any of this information via email, we'll call you. There's been a lot of title scams happening out there in the United States right now. So this is something, by not having it recorded, you set yourself up for the potential scams that are happening with title scams. So when you do record a land contract, the document should have the legal name of both the buyer and the seller. You'll need the property address, you'll need the legal description, just like any purchase and sales agreement, and also the date of the contract and the day when it should be finalized, and all of this should be signed and notarized. Anytime I've ever utilized a land contract, I've made it a practice to have it recorded, not only for my benefit, but the benefit of the seller, just so it shows intent for them and intent for me, and everybody knows where it stands. And once you have a contract in place that details out all the stipulations of the interest rate that's being paid, the price that's being paid, who has responsibilities for what, you're in a much better place because it is filed and recorded with the county. Now, these are some things that I've seen work really well with land contracts and why it's beneficial to get them recorded. But I'd be interested in your feedback. What are things that are important to you when it comes to having land contracts recorded? Comment below, let's engage in a dialogue. And as always, just for stopping by and watching this video, I have a free gift for you. It's aaronsfreetraining.com. It is a short-term rental calculator where you put in all the input, the purchase price, the income, the expenses, and it does all the work for you and spits out to you whether it's a good deal or not. And it's 100% free, no obligation, just aaronsfreetraining.com. Once again, thanks for stopping by. Have an amazing day.